Hello, everybody. This is Chad. This is Not All There, and I certainly am not all there right now. I am battling some sort of plague that the children brought home, and I seem to attract a lot of those. That's a conversation for another time. We're not going to get into those details of why and how right now. All is to say that I am not tip-top as I'm doing this, but it needs to be done, so we're doing it. On the episode that you're about to hear, I have a conversation with Mr. Martin Peters, who lives in Mumbai, India, and operates a wellness and de-addiction center, Samarpan, and he's been doing that for about 2 years in India. Prior to that, he was in Thailand. Prior to that, he was in the UK, where he is from. Martin is a lovely human being, a lovely person. He likes to talk, which is awesome, because so do I. And we do. We talk. We cover a lot of really interesting things. Martin's life is nothing short of, you're about to hear. You'll get it. From growing up in a small mining town all the way out to India, helping people with mental illness and addiction issues. Martin has traveled the long road, and along the way, he has seen and experienced things that have made him the person he is, and he is doing the good work. When this posts, this will drop on a Thursday, and that will be post-election day. So I want you guys to be making sure that you're taking care of yourselves. I know that this has been a very stressful and anxious time for just about everybody. We are fueled by all kinds of information from our social media feeds, from the person on the bus, from our friends and family. And let's all remember that we are human, and whether we sound like it or even really feel like it, we are all in this together. Forgiveness is a powerful, powerful tool in your life. Forgiving others, most importantly, forgiving yourself. Just remember that. Please do take care of yourself. Okay, I'm going to go have some tea and some sort of concoction that will, flush this thing out of my system. Please do sit back, get ready, and enjoy my fun conversation with Martin Peters. All right, welcome in. We are going international today, and I'm very excited about it. I have been speaking to this gentleman back and forth for several weeks now, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to get to know him, and we've also had a lot of good laughs. Many technical difficulties on my end. There's a bit of a time change between the two of us. I should be in bed, and he's having his morning cup of coffee. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Cheers. We're going to talk to Mr. Martin Peters today. He is residing currently in Mumbai, India. He operates a recovery center, anti-addiction center in Mumbai, and I think this is going to be a very fascinating conversation. One, because Martin's a sweetheart of a guy, and two, that I personally am very curious about culturally and within the Indian society, how addiction, mental health, how that is perceived, because the way that society is structured in India is a lot different than it is here in the States where I'm located, and also in other cultures around the world. So without further ado, Martin, say hello.
Hi, good morning here from Mumbai, and good evening there, Chad. I think it's about. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's about a 10-hour. Is it about a 10-hour?
It's according to the iPhone, it's 9:31 in the evening.
Yeah, so we are 11 hours time difference.
Okay, well there you go. It's dark here, sunny there. So, Martin, you have had quite a journey to get to where you are now. So you were originally now where did you grow up in the UK? In England, right? Yeah.
Okay,
London?
yeah. So I grew up in a place, an area called Cornwall. I'm originally from a mining town, a tin mining town called Camborne in Cornwall. One side of my family's from a tin mining town, which is Camborne. The other side of the family is from a fishing town, which is
Oh
St
wow.
Ives. So, both in Cornwall. So I'm a proper, as we would call, a proper Cornishman. And the phrase, I think, for people that Cornish people that live overseas is a cousin Jack. So I guess that's what
Cousin
we
Jack. Okay.
got. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have very similar parallels. Real quick, if you don't mind me jumping in, I my dad was a logger, and so I grew up on the southern coast of Oregon. So there was basically you either were a logger or you were a commercial fisherman. So not mining tin, but still very very tough and hard work, or you worked out
Yes.
on the ocean. So
Absolutely.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. So what got you out of the town then? Out of where you were living and growing up?
Well, I mean, I've always, I- I've always wanted, I've always enjoyed travel. I think that's,
Mm,
I've always enjoyed sort of seeing the world. I mean, interestingly, I think sort of people from Cornwall are dotted all around the world. So, and particularly a lot of people from my area emigrated in the. I'm just giving you some context here, sort of, really from sort of the 1800s, 1900s,
please.
all around the globe. Generally, ending up in places. If there's a mine, there's probably you're going to find a Cornishman sat at the bottom of it. All right, so there
Okay.
are there are clusters, I believe, in the US.
Yes.
I think there's definitely a cluster of Cornish people in Michigan. I think so, which is up in your area, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's yeah, we're
So
not far. I'm in
yeah,
Chicago. Yeah.
so I believe that there's a cluster there, and throughout South America there's clusters. Australia has the largest diaspora of Cornish people outside of Cornwall, from what I understand. So we're sort of dotted all around the world. I've always, as I said, I've always sort of had a fascination for travel, and I sort of, I mean, it's a long, convoluted journey to me getting to India, and I can probably get to that point in a moment, or
Sure.
when you ask some other questions, because I think if I sort of jump in and say, how do I end up in India, it sort of misses the sort of context of how I,
Right. No, no,
the
this is all
journey.
very good. This is
But
yeah,
yeah,
not
as I
yeah.
say, and I mean, I left my hometown at 18. I didn't move that far, actually, interestingly. I moved about 60 miles up the road, which was outside of Cornwall. I went to a place, and lived and studied in a place called Plymouth, which is a naval town,
Mhm.
or naval city. I was there for 3 years, and then I moved to Bristol, and carried on with my studies. I trained as a nurse in Bristol. Originally, my context there was that that when I went to Plymouth, my original plan was I was going to train as a social worker,
Mm.
and
What was it that drew you to that? What was it about
I'd,
the work
I'd
or
always had an interest with working with people right
okay.
from an early age.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I want to be a fireman, I want to be a soldier, I want to be a
Mhm.
lawyer. Didn't really have much interest in that. Um, Probably when I was younger, it was more around actually about being a football player.
Mm.
That was sort of the, not as in
No, 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 yeah, yep, yep.
football, but that was the sort of, that was the thing. But that didn't happen for a number of reasons. I I sort of had this, this idea that I would like to be involved in working with, people. Children, I think, initially was something I was interested in, and I did a little bit of work with that, but I realized quite quickly that that was not necessarily where I saw myself.
Mhm.
I enjoyed sort of working. I worked at a school for a little period of time, between my studies, between Plymouth and Bristol. So I had like about a 9 month gap between that, um, but yeah, as I say, I was originally going to do this thing as a social worker, because I was so young. that I was sort of told that I could do the 3-year part of the degree, but I'd have to wait a couple of years and come back and
Sure.
do the final part of the, the what it was called then. It was a certified qualified social worker, CQSW.
Okay.
And I sort of realized then, when I was doing that course, that I didn't think that that was either for me as well. It just didn't really fit
Right. Yeah.
what maybe, and this is not a thing about social workers, because I've worked with a lot of very good social workers over the years. I've
I
also worked with some not so
know a
good
few of them.
social. I've also worked with some not so good social workers.
That's quick
But
preface.
yeah, I just got the feeling that I was probably not the type of personality that would fit
Yeah. No,
into the
it
social work.
does take a certain
Yeah.
personality for sure.
So I sort of, I thought, well, okay, so my stepbrothers were both psychiatric nurses.
Hmm.
So I mean, they're a little bit older than me. So I decided to sort of go and train as a nurse, and that's that was the progression. I didn't work in addiction to start with. I moved around a little bit initially, got some experience in some different settings, which included working with people with severe and complex enduring um, learning disabilities, and then moved to work with the prison population. I ended up in the
Oh wow.
working, yeah, and I ended up working in HMP. Um, um, Prison service. Um, didn't like it.
What
For
was it? What kind of service was it that you were doing? So you were a psychiatric nurse. So what
yeah,
was the day
yeah.
to day? I mean, what were you up to while you were doing
Yeah. So I ended up in the prison
it?
in the
Yeah.
prison service. Had an opportunity to go over to work there. Trained really I was working as a manager, a prison, like a prison manager. So um, now, I mean, interestingly, I was still very young in my career.
Okay.
I think I was around about 18 months post qualification
Oh
when I
wow.
moved there. I think at that time I
Oh,
was the youngest
oh man.
grade in the country in the position that I was in.
That
Uh,
must have been an eye-opening
it
experience.
was an eye opening, and I sort of came into it thinking that this is really going to be really cool. This is really
Gonna
sort of,
save the world.
yeah, and I've got a lot of um respect for the people that work in those
Oh,
services.
absolutely.
Really,
Absolutely.
it's a really
Yeah.
tough environment. But I also feel, that, and this goes on further, that we incarcerate far too many people for
Oh,
for crimes that really, you know, I'm not saying that a crime is not,
it's
is
not worthy of the punishment.
yeah,
Um,
and I see and I see people coming into that system, and they're already on the peripherals of society,
yeah.
whether they come from, deprived backgrounds, that there's addiction, that there's, broken homes, that they've been through a number of traumatic, they're on peripheral. A lot of the people that come in are on the peripherals of society. We lock them up, and
This
then we throw them back
generational
out,
sort of
and they're excluded even further, because it's
yeah.
very difficult, as probably most people are aware, and I'm sure it's no different in the US.
Oh god, no.
But employing people with a criminal record is
Yeah,
very, very difficult.
it's very difficult. Yeah.
So what are we doing? I mean, I just feel that the whole way that we sort of address that issue is
That's
you know
broken.
not
It's
helpful.
absolutely broken. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
No,
and it's
so
a
I sort
broken
of did.
system and it's a heartbreaking,
Yeah, yeah,
it
exactly. So I sort of, I did that. I was there for around about, I think I did about 10 months.
wow.
So
That must have toughened your gut a little bit though,
yeah,
yeah?
and
Yeah.
I woke up one morning and I was just like, I don't want
Mm.
to do this anymore. This is just not for me. I didn't like being locked up myself. So
Yeah,
there's this other
yeah.
part where,
Oh, I
you
didn't
know,
even think about that
yeah,
psychological aspect of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you go in, you know, I mean, you go through all the security checks. The door slams and you're in. And that's it. You're locked away for 12 hours on a shift.
Hmm. Were you in a certain area of the prison? Was it uh, meaning were you working with you know, mentally ill
Mixture,
inmates, or was it just a
cross
mix
mixture, cross
across
mixture.
the okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Whew.
Unfortunately, what tends to happen is that prisons have a lot of people that have mental illness, and
Yes.
prisons
Sadly.
generally can't really cater for the needs of these types of people. So the whole system is really geared to failure. Of
Yeah.
incarcerated people.
Well, it's become a money making machine
It's a
for
money-making machine, yeah, there's a lot of people getting very rich on locking people up,
yep.
and unfortunately, locking people up often plays into public opinion. People feel that people wanna see people punished, they don't
Yeah.
necessarily
The
worry
streets are
about.
safer because of that guy that sold a
Yeah,
bag of coke is off the street. Well,
yeah.
maybe he was trying
So,
to feed his
yeah, yeah. So that was sort of that little part, and so I left. I sort of it was I sort of I went into work and I said I'm finishing, and they were like, well, when? I said, today,
now.
it's and what are you going to
That's
do?
good. That's a good time for you.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Seriously, it's just like
2 weeks, whatever whatever. Yeah, no, I'm
whatever,
done.
whatever, I'll do whatever, and I sort of I literally left that morning. I'll give them credit; they were very good. The person that I was
Well,
sort of reporting,
they had to have some sort of
yeah, the
system.
person that I was reporting, I said, look, I said, just with the greatest will in the world, you can spend the next sort of hour trying to talk me out of this or whatever. I said, my mind's made up.
Hmm.
I don't feel that can do I can do the job effectively. I also felt, and as I said, I was very early in my career, and I was in a managerial role, and I feel that I wasn't ready
Hmm.
for that. That I
Mhm.
didn't really have the experience or the skills, um, the wherewithal, whatever it is, to manage a large group of people. As in, and I'm
Yeah.
talking about staff as well, and
Mm.
all the intricacies of what goes on in terms of,
So how
politics.
old were you? What,
I
25,
was 20. I
26?
was 20, so I would have been 25.
Oh my god. I was a fucking mess at 25.
Well, it's
I
so fun.
my I had a family member who was my coke dealer, when I was that age, so things were
Come to
not
that in a
going
minute.
well. Yeah. You know, I was just thinking because hearing about the area that you grew up in and sort of the local working class environment,
Yes.
there is a hardness. No matter how kind of a person they may be or gentle, there's a hardness that comes with that kind of blue collar work.
Yeah.
Whether you're working in a mine, that's dangerous, tough work. As is fishing. If you're out on the ocean, that's very
Yeah.
dangerous work.
Yeah.
And that can be a very well. I mean, it can lead to repeated traumatic incidents every
Yes.
single day,
Yes.
and that leads to you know not doesn't lead to mental disorders. What I'm trying to get to is the mentality gets to a point where the drinking gets beyond the social aspect of it, but really starts to lead to a coping mechanism
Yeah.
for people in communities like this. And it can stay in the alcohol lane, or it can also branch out into other drugs.
Yes.
Like here in the States, which I'm sure it's everywhere, but that's like opioids, meth, things like that. So
Yeah.
when you were did you notice that while you were growing up, or was that just kind of part of the culture? And then also a second part to that is, did you happen to notice any of those behaviors while you were working in the prison? Meaning, like maybe someone you understood because they grew up like you did, and their path led them into prison where they're going to now have no chance. In other words, their addiction led them to a road where they're not lucky enough to find the help that they need.
Okay, this is a really good point. I mean, it's like there's two parts.
It's
There's
a
two
two-parter,
parts.
yeah,
There's
but
two
I had to
parts.
get it all in there.
Yeah, yeah, and but both very intertwined. So sort of. I mean, growing up, I think at the time when I was growing up as a child, the mines were still open. The fishing was really still was quite good.
Hmm.
We had a very large we had a very large foundry that sort of employed about 1,500 people in the
Yeah.
town. It was very prosperous. It was one of the most wealthy towns in the world back in the
Interesting.
1800s.
Okay.
Um,
Sure.
Now, unfortunately, during that time, the price of tin collapsed in the 80s.
Mm, yeah.
That it was cheaper to extract tin from open cast mining and not deep rock, hard rock mining. So the mines slowly but surely closed.
Mm,
Um, the foundry factory was bought out by an overseas company, and eventually they relocated the whole factory to Germany. So we lost that.
yep.
The fishermen have always been treated quite poorly as well, and particularly very badly in the last particularly in the last sort of 15 years, particularly in
Yeah.
the last. It's been even tougher in the last 6 to 7 since the UK exited Europe.
Oh,
We
right. Oh, shit.
so our area has always been a political kicking ball
Yep.
for corrupt politicians and politicians that really have no interest in our area because it's not London. It's 5 hours from London. It's often forgotten. It's one of the poorest areas in Europe
Mm,
now. However, if you go several miles out of the town, we have some of the most wealthy houses because we're right by the sea. So now have a massive influx of people from London and the southeast and further up country that have a lot more
yeah.
money buying holiday homes, second homes,
Hmm.
renting homes.
Hmm.
So what has compounded there, unfortunately, the area that I grew up in and have very fond memories of growing up. It was a community. It had its tough times. I'm not saying it didn't, but there was a
It
community.
was a community.
There was very little crime. I mean, it
Yeah.
was a really safe place to grow up.
Yep.
Fast forward to where we're at now, um, high incidences of crime, high incidences of addiction, homelessness.
Mm,
I look on and think we're in 2023, and it feels like we've gone back to maybe 1823 in the
mm,
way that the wealth disparity and how we treat the less well off, or the less people that are given opportunity. So it's really bad. It's really really bad area now. A lot of crime, a lot of addiction. If I walk through and I'll go back. As I said to you before we started, I'm heading back for
mhm.
5 or 6 days to
Oh, so
my.
does your mom still live in the
Yeah.
area?
So, yeah, my mum lives in the area still. We we
Okay.
we moved out of the town when I was probably around about 16. We
Okay.
moved to a village that's about 5, 5, 6 miles sort of outside of the
But I
town.
mean, it's still right there. That's not
So
far away.
yeah, I mean, we live in a nice, it's a nice village. I'm not, I come from a working class background. I'm proud of that. But I think, I was given what I would call a fairly privileged childhood in a lot of ways. That my grandparents and my mum and my stepdad in particular, um, gave me lots of opportunities and
Yeah.
encouragement.
Yeah.
So I was lucky, to be I was the first person really in the family to be university educated.
Mm,
I was for so I was very lucky to sort of be given some opportunities. But it's still home. It's always there's a tinge of sadness when I sort of go back, and I'm sure when I go back this week, I get there tomorrow afternoon. I fly out tonight, so I'll get there tomorrow afternoon after landing in London and a 5-hour train journey, and I'm sure what I understand that it's worse than it was last year. So
Yeah.
so so I
But
and
it's so relatable. It's so
oh
those what we're having here is, I mean, it's so relatable to me.
yeah,
And I don't I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm just speaking about me, but I think possibly something about this you can relate to. But you know, we didn't have much. I never went without. So many of my friends are struggling now, or people that I grew up with, family
yeah,
members. They're
yeah,
just there's a lot of addiction, a lot of mental illness uh, in my family,
yes,
in people that I know. But it took me a while to get to the point where I realized that all of these things, this environment that I grew up in, rather than using it as a more or less an excuse, I realized that, well, I can take all of that and I can do a lot of good with it, and almost
yeah,
as like a representation of where I came from. Like, there are people, real people, that are struggling, and
yes,
they're desperate, and desperation will lead you to do. I mean, they want to feed a family, they want to feed themselves. What are you going to do if
yeah,
everybody takes away your opportunities and you have nothing left? What are you supposed to do? It doesn't mean you're less than. You're just trying to survive. And then sadly, that does lead down the road to addiction and a lot of times incarceration. So did you see a lot of that in the prison that you were working in? A lot of,
yeah. I mean,
not
interesting.
directly relatable, but there
Yeah.
was
So
something about them you
yeah,
recognized.
when you asked that question, I said there's an interesting second part to this
Yeah.
because where I was working, I was in Bristol.
Okay.
So a significant percentage of the people that were incarcerated in the prison that I worked in Bristol were from South Wales. And South Wales, and I don't know how familiar you are with the
Yeah,
UK.
I have
Yeah,
a general idea
yeah.
of
So
the
South Wales was another big mining community.
Mhm, mhm.
It was a coal mining community.
Okay.
So their two main industries in South Wales was coal and steel.
Okay.
And
Dirty work.
yeah, dirty work, hard work.
Hard
These
work.
hard,
Oh,
hard,
shit.
tough people. Good people, good communities. Very similar, very very similar mindset to where I come from. Both areas relate genetically as well. They relate.
Hmm.
Interestingly,
Okay.
Celtic. We're both
Oh, okay. Mhm.
Celtic areas now. What I saw there was probably a foretaste of what has happened now
Ah,
into my community. The
I
coal
see.
mine closures were before the tin closures. All
Mm,
right, so those areas were decimated by the Conservative government, and I'm going to use that just because I want to. But those communities
it's
were absolutely decimated by Margaret Thatcher, and unfortunately, what we've now seen is we've seen our communities also decimated, and also again by the Conservative government, and Margaret Thatcher as well, and latterly people like Boris Johnson with his Brexit lies and stuff
yeah.
like that. I'm
Mhm.
using this because I think there's such a big impact on the exclusion and the lack of opportunity, the poverty, what I'm seeing, the
Absolutely.
division in society now, which is
Absolutely.
horrendous.
Oh,
That that
I've never
people
seen anything like it.
I've never seen anything like it. I didn't
Yeah.
used to see homeless people growing up, Chad. It
Right.
was not something I ever saw. I see it now. I walk through my hometown and I will see 30 or 40 homeless people. There are people now sleeping in the graveyards, in the church, in the graveyards, in tents, using drugs, injecting and stuff like that. I never saw that as a child. That was completely alien. That was an alien concept to me. Drug use was really an alien concept.
Yeah.
That type of
That
thing
type. That type. Yeah.
didn't happen in our types of communities.
Right. It didn't. It didn't. And
Just
it
didn't. Drinking
no.
did.
Oh yeah,
Drinking,
drinking was a
drinking
big
did.
thing. I left my home at 18, and that was 1992,
Yeah.
and 93 when I left, and
Yes.
it was kind of starting. I could see it kind of start to go that way, and
Yeah.
then not long after, it really went downhill. There was meth was a really
Yeah.
big thing where I grew up, and I grew
Yes.
up in a port town, and so a lot of drugs would come in through
Yeah.
the ships and the shipyards. So yeah, it very similar. That it
Yeah.
just took a hard nosedive, and people were hurting, people were pissed, and
Yes.
it's almost as if they just kept flooding the area just to keep them there. But that's a
Yeah,
conversation for another
you
time.
know,
I
I mean, I
mean,
just
but
see it now. I walk through, that area now, and I mean, it's completely. I mean, if someone had told me how this would look, when I was a child growing up, that in sort of 40 years' time, this town is going to look like this, I would have laughed
mm,
and said, "There's no chance. Why
right,
would we be going back to that? That's a
right,
backward step." And
right.
hey, here we are.
Here
This is
we
what we're
are.
actually seeing. Homelessness, addiction, unemployment, significant mental health issues, a lack of mental health beds, a lack of access into services for treatment. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. um, and so on. So yeah, that's my hometown, and it's a mess. And and I know there's really good people trying to do some really good work at community levels, trying to sort of to take care of the people with mental health. I've worked in the community mental health and acute admissions mental health in that area before I moved over to Asia. So I spent time working there, and there's really good people. But they've been also been decimated by the cutbacks. The services that we had
Hmm.
in 2000, early 2000s, were actually really quite good. There was a growth in provision of services. There was a lot more staff coming in. There was creation of new services like crisis resolution, assertive outreach. There was other sort of drug DTA drug treatment teams. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was really good stuff that was happening. The idea was that they were going to reduce the amount of beds, inpatient beds for the psychiatric mental health beds, because they were going to try and make sure that the provision was in the community. Now, that's a great idea. I think, putting people into hospital long term is not, the goal. Unfortunately, what has happened is they've continued to cut the beds,
Ah, Jesus.
but guess what? They've also cut the services.
Yeah.
Since,
Guess
so,
what?
since,
So
so
which
since
means you've got more people with more severe problems, because the mental illness, it doesn't flatline. If it goes
no, it's got
untreated,
worse. I mean, it's
it
got
gets worse
worse.
and worse and worse,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
gets passed on.
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
So
it's a little bit like having a garden, and if you don't take care of it, it becomes overgrown. That's
yeah,
what's happened. You've got to keep on top of these things. And in 2010, our National Health Service had the highest ever ratings of satisfaction and provision that it had ever had. It was well funded, it was well run, and it was effective. We now have 7 million people on waiting lists. All right, it's his lowest ever satisfaction rate. The NHS is in ruins. The austerity of David Cameron, Boris Johnson, Theresa May, Rishi Sunak have absolutely decimated our public health sector, and unfortunately, flooded it with venture capitalists and people that are interested in making money and privatization of services that should be there for the public. All right, this is, now I work in the private sector, but I'm a believer that we should be providing free care at the point of contact, that people
right,
that need it, that can't afford it, should never have to come in and say, have you got insurance or have you got a credit card? Because if you haven't, you're going to be
you're
waiting or
fucked.
you're not. That's a problem.
And that is a problem, and that is a problem here. I think it's a problem across the world, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Um, that the blatant repression of anyone who needs the help.
Yes.
It's really it's sad, it's maddening, and you know I started doing this podcast as like a side project, just something for fun, and it's turning into
Yeah.
something that I'm very proud of and didn't quite imagine would get there. And it's something that I'm providing that hopefully whatever I do here or our conversation here will either inspire someone to try and help,
Yes.
or it may help someone that needs it. It's like any bit that we can provide to people in free or the lowest amount possible, it helps.
Yeah, I think also, Chad, which is really important, is that having these types of conversations hopefully also enable people to maybe change some of the perceptions that they have. That
Exactly.
that
Yes.
that,
Yes.
there's this perception as, well, they chose to do that, or, if they worked harder, they wouldn't be in this situation, or, you know, I'm okay, why aren't they? Or,
Yeah.
I don't want to pay tax for people that aren't working, or, you know, I mean, there's all these sort of
Oh,
tropes that I hear constantly
yeah.
that,
Yeah. And
that sort of is,
it's
that
maddening and
yeah,
it's
I'm woke.
heartbreaking.
I'm woke. I'm okay with that. If you want to call me woke, that's fine. But
Yeah.
but if woke means sort of being socially aware and caring about people, I'm quite happy to
Yeah.
be
I'm fine with
branded
that.
that.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Really good
Fine. You
with that.
can ignore your sister. I'll go ahead and talk to her and help her
Yeah.
if that's what it
Yes.
takes.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so wow. Okay. Um so you where did okay, how did you end up getting into the international work that you're doing? Because
Okay. So
this is
okay.
we could keep talking about about localization, but I want to you have a unique experience. You have a real solid and
Yeah.
real um, worldview on addiction and mental health,
Yes.
and I'm I'm kind of fascinated to find out, and I think I know the answer already. Is that it's everywhere and it all sort of looks the same. It's just how it's perceived and received
Yes.
and accepted, right?
Absolutely. Look, I don't think, I mean, I talked about localization and stuff, but, all around all the places that I've worked in, there are pockets that are going through similar situations. People are exposed to similar scenarios. The addiction doesn't particularly discriminate. I mean, it's,
No.
the demographics of what people, that changes, depending on, what people use, may depend
Mhm.
on what demographic that they come from, that,
Sure. Or
where
there
they
could
live.
be, yeah, right. There could
Yeah,
be.
where they live is likely to change what they might use. So, if I was looking at the UK, I would say, the bigger issues in the UK tend to be around alcohol, heroin, cocaine, and these these legal, or what, well, they're not legal highs anymore. Things like spice, which are very targeted at the sort of the lower income. So, that sort of side. Meth's not that big in the UK. It's around, but it's not big. I'm surprised, but it's not. Coke is the one. Now, if I moved to where I was working prior to moving to India, and I'm talking about Thailand,
Mhm.
then it would be alcohol and it would be meth. All right. And there would be some heroin, there would be some opiate use up in the hills, up in the
Okay.
Golden Triangle, but that's very cultural. All right.
Mm.
And it's
Okay.
available. And
Mhm.
there are still other people that are using it. But the biggest issues in Southeast Asia really are focused around about meth. What
I
I
had no
found,
idea.
yeah, I mean, what I found really interesting was that when I first, initially when I was sort of working in Thailand, and we were clients that were coming in, it was generally because people were coming from overseas,
Mm.
and it was more most of the sort of things were alcohol, cocaine, a little bit of heroin and prescription meds. And I think it was around about 2000, and it must have been around about 2010. And I always remember this young girl came in. She came in from Australia. I think she was from Perth. She was only about 19, 20. She'd managed to sort of get hooked up with bikers,
Mm.
that, and she got involved in the meth scene, and I mean, she was a
Mm,
real mess. And
mm.
that was the first person that I'd sort of worked with really that was sort of, like I say, like, just meth.
Yeah.
And over the next sort of coming years, working with Australian clients, and probably around about 50 to 60% of my clients that were coming in over for treatment into Thailand were from Australia, that 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 probably 70% of the clients coming in from Australia was methamphetamine.
Really? Wow.
So the
Jesus.
whole demographic changed from alcohol, cocaine to alcohol and meth. Those were
Uh-huh.
the big ones. So,
Nasty business.
Australia has a huge meth problem.
Really?
Yeah.
I
So,
I would never have guessed that.
yeah,
You know.
so you just, and it's, prescription medication is always in sort of, unfortunately, is
Yeah.
everywhere as
Yeah.
well.
Right.
But I'm
Right.
sort of talking about, street drugs. So, the demographics of what people use, where they live, what money they have is going to be sort of, very much around about what they're using. How they use, it's all pretty similar in a way. You
Yeah.
know, the,
Yeah.
your guy,
So you can't get too creative with that stuff, but
well,
you know.
no, and I mean, I think anyone with an addiction, and I always used to sort of say this to, and I'll talk a little bit about. And I'm quite happy to talk about. Unfortunately, my stepfather was an alcoholic.
Oh.
Unfortunately, and it killed him. I mean, that was, and I
How
think
old was he when he passed?
he was 71.
Jesus, what a
Um,
long, slow go.
yeah, I mean, really, realistically, it was only problematic when he retired.
Oh, that is such a
Yeah,
common so common.
yeah, I mean, growing up, sort of, when he was working, I mean, he drank, but I mean, it was not anything. It might be a
Well, the
couple of
whole
glasses.
work hard, play hard. Like, he
Yeah,
works
maybe a
hard,
couple
sure,
of
he can have a
beers,
good time. Yeah.
very disciplined. Actually, very disciplined. I'm having my 2 drinks this evening. I mean, that was how it was. I
God
mean,
bless him if he can do that.
yeah, well, I mean, well, unfortunately, he couldn't in the end. I mean, that was
Well,
part of the problem. But I mean, I can remember sort of, going to the pub with him, and he would
mm,
say, "Well, I've had my 2 pints. I'm going home," and I'd be like, "Don't you want another one?"
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but but and he'd be like, "No, no, 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 no. This is like it's 6 o'clock now. This is, I'm off for my tea, my dinner." So, so very disciplined. Unfortunately, what sort of transpired was that over time, that once he stopped working, once he retired, the drinking sort of crept in.
Mm.
It was no longer just having a couple of drinks in the evening. It sort of started with lunchtime, and then it was sort of lunchtime and afternoon and evening, and then it
All
was,
day.
then it was sort of, you know it was like morning.
Yeah,
morning
yeah.
morning till that, and it was really painful to watch. My mum did absolutely everything that she could. Getting services, getting help was really difficult. I was living overseas. I managed to secure beds for him to go to rehab. I'd had, my colleague Roland uh, even offered to fly over from the US, and but
I'll be speaking with Roland.
ultimately, he was not having a bar of it. There was no,
Ugh.
he just didn't want to see it. And I always remember, I was there. I was back. I think I was home for like a week or something like that, and and we had this drinks cabinet. I always remember we had this drinks cabinet. We don't have it anymore, but there was this drinks cabinet. You could always hear it because when you opened it, there was this specific rattle,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and I think it must have been I think it was about 7:30 in the morning. And I was sort of, I was in my room, and I was having a cup of tea. I was like reading the news, whatever I do sort of in that morning sort of bit.
Mhm.
I probably actually I'd have been reading my emails to see what was going on at work as well, actually.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. Well, that's the world we live in.
yeah, and I've heard the rattle. I heard the rattle. It's like,
Oh,
hang on a minute,
wait.
And I'd gone down anyway. I'd gone back down about 30 minutes later. I said, "You've been in the drink champ?" "No, I haven't." You know, and
Oh
you
man.
know, I mean, we laugh about it now,
I know, but
and,
it's so
and
sad.
it's so sad. And I know, you know, from my mum in particular, that how painful it
Yeah,
was, how painful it still is, that seeing someone that literally was a good guy, a really good guy, you know, great job, pillar of the community, involved in lots of sort of thing, you know, just involved in did lots of things, to
mhm,
what alcohol did to him, that it took absolutely everything. But
everything.
in that process, it, you know, the pain and suffering that it caused for my mum was, you know, was immense. I mean, it was, you know, it was very traumatic for.
Well, addiction, as they say, is a family disease, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because the you know, it's heartbreaking to hear that, you know, as a recovering alcoholic
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
it's the pain and the turmoil and the shame that goes with it, and even just to the strength that he would, you know, use to say, "No, I wasn't in the cabinet." But,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
I mean,
like,
I laugh
dude,
about it, but it's like, you know, it's so
I know, but it's like, it's cool if you just say you were,
yeah,
okay?
yeah.
But just what he no, that really, for me personally, that story I can laugh at because I was the one saying the lies, but also it's very heartbreaking to hear that
It it is,
it
and I think
reduces people to
yeah,
that.
I think the interesting thing was, and I used to say to my mum, I said, "Look," I said, "Mum, you know, like, there's you know, you can go and get some support. You can go to, you know, you can go to, you know, Al-Anon, you can go
Mhm.
to, you know, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't, what will people think? You know, and there was a lot of that because we come from, you know, a fairly conservative area, if that makes sense. You know,
Oh,
there's
no,
still,
it does,
you know,
absolutely,
and my mum
absolutely.
comes from that generation, you know, she's
Mhm.
that sort of older generation.
Yep.
That, you know, that talking about this is, you know, there's a lot of shame involved. People talked about this in hushed tones, even when I was
Mm.
growing up.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely,
so and so's an
absolutely.
you know, so and so's an alcoholic. Did you know? You know, so
Yeah.
there's a whole sort of there's this whole sort of thing, and I
It's a sign of weakness and shame upon the
yeah,
family
and I
and
want to come to this in a minute because I think this is really interesting what you just said, that word, the sign of weakness. But I just want to just sort of just carry just very briefly, and I
please,
always
no.
remember this conversation, and I was, you know, and I'd gone out, we'd gone to the village. In our village, we have a um, basically a pub, uh, a garage.
Those are
We
the
get
best
some
kind.
petrol. You can get some petrol, and we have a shop.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
um, We used to have a post office, but that's been
Oh,
closed. So, but you know, you sort of
yeah.
get the idea that there's not,
Yes, I
you know,
do,
it's
very
not, you
much,
know.
very much.
So, and I'd gone down to the village. I'd gone down to the village, down in the centre of the village. There's the pub. I'd gone down with my mum, and she said, "Oh, we're going to go. You know, a few people know that you're back over. I think, you know, we're talking about 15, probably. I don't know, 15. Well, probably I don't know. What's it now? Shit, I don't know. 10, 12 years ago, maybe, you know, she said,
Mhm.
"Oh, you know, there's a few people in the village. Let's go down. You know, they'd be good. You know, good to see you.
Yeah,
Let's go and get some
see
food."
and
So I
catch
thought,
up.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, not a problem. You know, so I've gone down, and there was obviously people that I know. You know, had lived in the village for many years, or you know, family had lived in the village for many years, and you know, one of them said, "Oh, you know, where's Gary? You know, that's my stepdad. You know," and my mum was like, "Oh, you know, oh, he's not very well." I said, "Look," I said, I'm sorry, I'm gonna." So I just said, "I'm
fuck
sorry, mum,
this.
I'm not having this."
Yeah.
I said, "Look," I said, "He's got an alcohol problem, and you know." He's drunk and he's not going to be coming out, and you know he's not very well, that's true, but you know he's got a problem with alcohol. One of the people, we all know. And my mum's face was like, and we came home and she said, they all know. And I said, Mum, everyone knows. It doesn't matter. You might think that no one knows. Everyone knows. They see it. They see the
Mhm.
changes in behavior. They see the things. You can't hide these things. And I
Yeah.
say this here, and I bring this back because working in India, and you asked me a little bit about India, and there's a lot of stigma. There's a lot of
Mhm.
shame around addiction. You talked about people see it as a mental weakness or a immoral, a moral failing. So there's this whole thing in the families. They continue to enable stuff because
Yeah,
they don't want people to know.
right.
Everyone knows.
They all
No,
know.
I mean
I
it's
was the last one to find out that I was
who
an
was the last one to
alcoholic.
find out? Yeah.
Yeah. They were like, I came out and everybody's like,
Yeah,
"Really? Oh,
yeah.
there's a surprise."
We all know. So I mean, it's just, I mean, it's insane. I mean, it is insane, isn't it? At times, there's
Oh, it
this
is.
whole thing
It
where often families, as well, and it's tough. I get it. I
so
really
tough.
get it.
It
So
it
yeah,
is, and you know, it's an addiction is a selfish disease for the person who suffers from it, but also from the family, because they don't want to admit to themselves that their loved one, sibling, child has an addiction issue, and they
yeah,
certainly don't want their peers to know about it because they
yeah,
feel that they'll be judged in some
yeah,
way.
yes,
And the enabling just continues and continues. You may not be giving them money or financial support or anything like that, but not being honest about it and speaking about it
yeah,
enables that activity, those actions, to continue on and continue on.
yeah,
um so we'll just like so you went from, you went to Thailand, you did some work there, now you are in India, and this is where I'm kind of happy about the way this conversation is led, because India is a very, well, culturally, it's very fascinating to me in many ways.
yes,
There's the spirituality, the religion aspect of it, which is very mixed. I know that, but there's also the way that the society is structured. It's like it's a very plainly open caste system, right?
yes, yes,
So how how is so I'm your plain old alcoholic. I did other fun stuff, but
yeah,
alcohol was always my thing.
yes.
How well, maybe because I'm a guy, it may not be as looked down upon. I don't know. I'm just speculating here, but so a 50-year-old married father of two who's an alcoholic, how is he seen in India? And also, how would a woman of that age be
Well,
perceived in
yeah, I
society?
mean really two very good questions, two slightly different answers,
Well,
partly
yeah,
because
I figured, yeah.
yeah, so I mean, um, again, India, I think it depends on where you come from in India, and
What do you mean by where you come from? Is it like
well, there
geographically,
are certain
economically, or
yeah, I think that, and there are certain areas of India where drinking is seen as, particularly for a male, it's seen as something, very,
machismo kind of?
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of machismo. So, I've got a few Punjabi friends and, they'll say, well, Punjabis are, we're the hard drinking, party people, and I mean, there is that part. Um, um, Alcohol is probably the biggest issue that we see for clients coming into treatment. So the demographic of the clients that I tend to see here, both in outpatient and in residential, the bulk of people is probably alcohol. All right,
Yeah.
so that's probably the number one primary substance. Secondly, on that, again, it's going to depend on the demographic. But because I work in a private service and the demographic that we tend to work with are people that are a little bit more affluent and have money that have
Sure.
travelled.
Sure.
So it would be things like, probably cocaine and MDMA, ecstasy, those types of like club drugs, alcohol and prescription meds.
Ecstasy.
Yeah, and a bit of prescription and prescription meds. Prescription meds is a big issue because there's a lot of very poor prescribing here in India, or
Oh, so it's just kind
you
of
know,
loosey,
yeah,
real
yeah, it's
loose.
very loose. I think there's a tendency for for people to take the doctor's word that what the doctor tells me is the only way, and I
Oh,
think psychiatrists are on such a pedestal here in India. So, and I don't think people ask questions. I mean, I did an awareness talk last week to a number of like executives, and I was saying, actually, when you go and see a doctor, you should be asking questions. Why are you prescribing this? What are the side effects? How long am I going to be on it? Is it addictive? What is your plan with this medication? And they were like, oh, well,
mhm.
we've never thought about asking the doctor those questions. I said, well, you should.
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, they're
so
not all angels.
yeah, so, unfortunately, I see a lot of people coming in that have been hooked on benzos for, 3, 5, 7, 9 years, maybe further.
And
So
they
we see a
just
lot
keep
of that.
getting it filled and filled and
Yeah, it's a lot, there's ways of filling. I mean, obviously you have that issue in the US where people doctor shop and stuff like that.
oh, sure, yeah, yeah.
And people that are feeling an addiction, they're always extremely creative, as you know. So that
Oh, I
definitely doesn't change. It doesn't matter where you
mhm.
go.
Oh, my
The
brother had a the pill issue, and he
Yeah,
got real creative.
yeah. So people, on that part, there's those sort of things don't change. Now, I think for the alcohol, that whole part, a lot of the stuff
Yeah,
that a lot of people struggle with here is actually asking for help. As you say, a lot of
right.
problems around, but there's still a lot of shame. So even the 50-year-old male alcohol alcoholic, often the family really struggle. The family also really struggle sometimes to say you're either getting help or there's going to be some consequences. That thing doesn't happen here. It's very uncommon. Like sort of in the West where the family will turn around and say,
Yeah,
you carry on doing that,
you're
then
out.
you're out.
Yeah, right.
That you can carry on doing it elsewhere. Not interested. That doesn't tend to happen here. All right, because everything is very family orientated. People live in joint families, so there
Right.
is a lot of, and there is unfortunately a lot of enmeshment and a lot of
Yes.
um even their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness,
Yep.
because family is key to people getting in, their recovery as well. So working with the family here is something that we do a lot with anyway. It's really important trying to educate the family, also giving them support around what it's like, being with someone and sort of helping them. That's really important part of the
It
treatment,
must be so challenging.
but it is very challenging. Now, we talk about the male. Now, unfortunately, the female part, from what I
Yes,
see,
this is the one that I'm
this
most
is yeah. So this is certainly and I was at a conference the week before. I was in Srinagar up in Kashmir, and a few people were presenting some papers on the demographics of um, client demographics of what
mhm,
people, and it's extremely clear that females accessing services is minimal
mm,
compared to what the problem is. We know that the
sure,
problem's there,
yeah,
but it's really, really not. And we see that particularly in residential, female clients coming into residential is probably around about 20, probably 15, 20% of our clients are
mm,
female coming into residential. So it's significantly lower than what I would normally see. I would normally see around about a 60-40. There is normally a male, a male
yes, yeah,
thing.
yeah, for
Yeah,
sure,
so I mean, and I'm talking here in residential. A little
mm,
bit different in outpatient, that people
okay,
coming in female. I think we have to take into account that often females are house. They look after the house, they look after the children.
right,
There's all of these types of things that we also have to throw into this. which is a barrier to accessing services. But there's a huge shame. There's a huge shame issue here for this. There's a huge stigma around not just addiction but mental health here in India. I think things will change. I think things are changing.
Hmm.
It's very easy for me to say, well, we do this in the West and blah 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 blah. But society takes time to
Yes, it does.
to to to
And
to come along to.
and you're talking about an old society and a
Yes,
massive number of
yeah,
people that live in that
yeah.
society.
So it's been interesting, and again, I think also what I've you know what I've experienced and found, and having looked at the way treatment is delivered here, generally it's been quite dated. The
Mm.
approaches to treatment quite dated. A lot of the treatment models are just purely 12 steps. Now we know that 12 steps is a brilliant peer support group. So
Yeah,
many people get,
absolutely.
but there's also so many people that just won't do it. And
Nope.
it's not a
Nope.
treatment. I can't stress this enough, that as much as I have all the respect of I respect the 12-step fellowship and what it does, and the services
Hmm.
that it offers
Hmm.
to so many people that are in so much need. It's not a treatment program. It doesn't address people's other
No,
issues, co-occurring disorders,
nope.
trauma. It doesn't address, I mean, there's so much more to this than you know, just working some
So
steps and
that's
going.
that's how I got sober, was through 12 steps. I
Well,
still,
so many
work.
people
I have
do.
friends. I mean, to me, it has evolved into a baseline that
Yeah,
if whatever happens, some catastrophe, shit hits the fan in my life, and I start to decline, I'm not, for me personally, I'm not going to fall below that 12-step floor.
yeah,
But to your point, that's not for, I mean, I've done IOP for trauma. I've had hours and hours and fucking hours of
yeah,
therapy,
yeah,
but that was that combination. So that was my treatment. But like you said, I was afraid to go to 12 steps. I was fucking desperate, and I knew somebody, and that's
yeah.
how I ended up there. And you know what? It worked for me. But I'm sorry
Yeah,
to jump in. I see
and
you
I think
said.
it's great, and I think I mean, and the other part about the 12 steps is, I mean, you can literally go anywhere in the world and you can find a
Yeah.
meeting, can't you? I mean, it
Yes.
really,
That
there is,
that's a beautiful thing. That is a
I
beautiful
mean, that's
thing.
a beautiful thing. I mean,
Mhm.
it's amazing, that whole thing. But we have to also look at we have to look at sort of the way we work with people. The collaboration, working collaboratively with a client, treatment
Mhm.
planning, um, you know, robust relapse prevention models,
Yes.
um, um, you know, working people with process, um, process-led groups. These types of things are very alien to the concept of how treatment's been delivered in India. So, one of the things that sort of, when I sort of came over here, I came over here in the end of 2020, the end of 2021, and this is a story in itself. I mean, as I probably told you before, I was in Thailand. I was in
Right.
Thailand. I was in
And
Thailand for a number of years. I was in
mhm.
Thailand from 2005.
Oh wow.
I was involved in the setting up of the first international rehabs in Thailand. I'm probably seen as, and someone said to me, you're one of the pioneers of international destination rehabs in Thailand, and I think I am. I think
Mm.
the fact is that I ran the largest private provider pre-COVID in Thailand, had 3 centres, 76 beds. It was a large organisation. Obviously, COVID didn't help, um, but
So what you're
I,
saying is you're kind of a big deal, Martin.
I'm not a big deal. I'm not. I'm not. I'm really not. I'm actually pretty. I'm pretty standard. I'm pretty standard. I'm pretty standard. I've been fortunate. I think that's one thing. I
For
think I
sure.
will say I've been fortunate. I think that you know, although being fortunate, I think I've managed to get that because I've done good jobs of what I've done over the years.
Yeah.
That 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 I've got a strong background in the field, not just of addiction, but but also in mental health. And I think actually moving to India, and I got my job. I actually had my interview for this job. I was in state quarantine, so I'd gone back to the UK during COVID.
Yeah.
I did about 8 months working as a nurse during COVID,
Hmm.
on the front line in the UK.
Very good
Um,
for you.
and I went back to Thailand in June 21. To get back into Thailand, um, I had to do 14 days locked up in a hotel in isolation. So, and I laugh about it now, but believe me,
Oh, it must have been
it's something
miserable.
I never want to repeat ever again. It was, and I had my interview. Um, while I was in quarantine for this job. It was, my initial intention was I'm going back to Thailand. I'm going to go back and do kind of continue with the work I've been doing. If I'm not, I'm maybe going to go back to the UK and do some contract work, and just sort of spend maybe 3 months in the UK, 3 months in Thailand, 3 months. I sort of was sort of at that point. I'm not too sure. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I got this message that sort of came in LinkedIn. It said, "Are you interested in working in India?" I was like, "Well, I can have a chat." I mean, I'd had many of these messages over the years. I'd had lots of these types of things, and I thought, well, what's the harm? What is the harm? Have
No.
a
Yeah. Why
conversation.
not?
I think I was in my third day of my quarantine. I think it was. I think, no, was it my
That's
second
something to do.
second day. Second day of quarantine. I had my interview. I had my first
Oh,
interview.
shit.
So I thought, well, okay, they said, could you do an interview? I said, yeah, I'll be in quarantine. I said, I've got all the time in the
All
world.
the
I'm
time.
not going to
Yeah,
be doing
all
anything.
the time.
And I opened up my computer. There was about 10 faces sort of facing me.
Oh,
So I
wow.
was like, oh, okay.
Oh,
So I
it's
wasn't sort of
okay. Fine.
I wasn't expecting that. I
Well,
think we
she
had,
put pants on.
yeah, I mean, we had a conversation for probably about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes.
Mhm.
As you probably know, I can talk. So, and sort of, rounded that up. I thought, well, that was pretty, that was quite interesting. That went quite well. Anyway, I think the next day I got a message. Are you interested? Would you like to come? So I was like, I'm interested, So they said, could you come on another call? So I think I was in day four of quarantine. Got on another call, and sort of had a few more questions. They had a few more questions. I had a couple of questions, um, and then it was like, we'd like to make you an offer. So I was like, okay. So we sort of went back and forth a little bit about how that would how that would look. I think
Mhm. Mhm.
on day 5 of my quarantine, I had a contract,
Wow.
and day 6, I signed the contract and made a commitment to come, and I got out of
And then
quarantine.
8 days to question what
Yeah,
the
and
hell you were just
I'm in quarantine, and I'm like, and I said to I called my daughter, who was back in my house in Chiang Mai, and I said, "Oh, Em," I said, I'll see you in about 7 more days or 8 more days when I get out of quarantine." And I said,
And
"I've
by the
got
way,
something to tell you, but I'll tell you now. I've got a new job." And she was like, "Oh, really? Where are you going? Or what are you going to be doing?" And I said, "I'm going to India." so, so, and she was like, "Oh, okay." my mu- so I called my mum. I said, um, "I'm moving again." So she was like, "Where are you going now?" I was like, "I'm going to India." And she's like, "Oh, really?" So I made that commitment, and I was meant to arrive here in like September 2021. Then they had COVID was a bit of a mess, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But, and so I ended up sort of got here in December 2021, and then we had about 3 month run into to set up a center, and put a program into place and stuff like that, and we managed to get it done in sort of under 3 months, really, of me being on the ground here. We had to make alterations and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge
Everyone
undertaking.
looks at rehab. It's not just about, it looks easy. Believe me, there's all these moving parts at the behind that
Yeah.
goes on, and I think that part. So and we did. We managed to get that, and it's been good. Our organisation's a foundation, so it's a
We
non-profit.
haven't mentioned the name of your organization.
So no, the organisation I work for now is called Samapan. So Samapan is a foundation that has a residential. We have a residential program in Pune, and we have an outpatient program, or outpatient services, I should say, in Mumbai. We are the first um, intensive outpatient program in India, which we opened in in July of this year. So that's the first ever IOP that's been run for addiction in India. So we opened that in July, and that's heavily subscribed to. It's been a very popular concept for a lot of people.
How was it received initially? I mean, it's not that. I mean, so how has it been received so far? As far
Well, I
as
mean, interestingly, when in my time here, I've faced over a period of time. I've been told many times that this won't work in India. India's
Mm,
different.
right.
You can't do that in India. Blah blah blah. I've had this constantly said to me over a period of time by various people. Interestingly, all of those things that I can't do in India, won't work in India, don't happen in India, they all work in India. So it's just really sometimes shifting the mindset of what it is, because people are very comfortable knowing what they know. People are
Of
very
course,
comfortable,
of course. Yeah,
so if you don't
absolutely.
know something, then it's a threat, or it's perceived
Yeah,
as a threat. It's
people are
seen
always
as,
afraid of what they don't know.
yeah, and I think this goes for people in general.
Oh,
So
yeah, across
so
the board, whatever it is.
yeah, yeah. So I think some of the stuff that we've done, I was outright told, initially that, no, that's not going to work, or stuff like this. And it's been we've had it's not always been easy.
Well,
Um,
sure. I mean, this kind of
yeah,
work never is. I mean, w-
no, I mean, I think,
you're trying to change. You're trying to change perceptions. You're essentially trying to change a person's world, right? What they know is what they know, and you're like, well, but what if we went this way with it?
yeah, and I think there's two parts to this as well, Chad. I mean, it's not, it's we're trying to do something different with the clients that we work with, but we're also trying to do something different with the people that we work with, as in,
Oh,
um,
your colleague, like
yeah,
your clients
yeah,
and your colleague.
yes, yeah.
Yes.
So all of a sudden we're trying to do something that's a little bit different than maybe what people
Whew,
are used to. So,
that's hard work.
yeah, so I mean, we are, we're sort of, we're sort of going against the trend.
Yeah,
We're doing things
yeah.
that no one else has been doing. That people have got a lot of misconceptions about stuff. So that takes time, as
And
well.
it's like,
You
it
have
does
to,
take time, but
yeah, you have to sort of find that people that may be working in the field, of mental health or addiction, that
mhm,
they've been doing
mhm.
something for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, actually, we can do something slightly different. That can be quite challenging, and it
Oh, well,
takes.
yeah, the resistance has gotta be off the charts, quite honestly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is something that I've had sort of, over many years, because I've been
Yeah,
running, I've
you were in
run
Thailand,
programs.
you were in
Yeah,
a
I've been running
prison
programs, setting up.
environment. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, running programs, setting up programs.
Mhm,
I've also gone in and restructured. I've gone in and restructured places. Reorganize. Complete restructure. Back in 2018, we acquired another business. And my job was to go in and restructure everything in terms of the program, the people, the everything. Everything had to be restructured because it was a mess. It
yeah,
took.
old theories, old thoughts, old
Yeah,
habits, whatever you wanna call it, and you're not getting any progress. You may have some success, but you're really not making much of a difference
yeah, yeah,
with the way things progress.
yes.
How do you go out into the public and speak to this? What are you doing
Uh,
publicly to try and
so
help,
yeah,
change perceptions and,
yeah.
and
I mean,
even getting local government or businesses involved with it?
Yeah, I mean, we are. I mean, we, part of what we do is that, we're doing various awareness workshops.
Mm.
I've just come back last week. Myself and Obi just came back from Gujarat in which is another state in India, which has prohibition, by the way. Gujarat is a prohibition state.
Oh shit.
So, but it also has the highest. It also has the highest rate of alcoholism
Go
in.
figure.
so, so, or I think it was the highest rate of alcohol consumption. Anyway, it's
It's
so,
a yeah.
well, I think we all know. I think we all probably know that prohibition is sort of is a failed concept. Really, I
Oh,
think
absolutely.
it's never really worked. But anyway, we went there. We were there for a couple of days. We did an awareness evening, with executives, and then on the second day we did four groups of various executives came in and did ran a group therapy for four people,
You
for four
did.
groups of people, and
How'd that go?
a lot of stuff is around about people's, about, you know, understanding themselves a little bit more, understanding a little bit more about it, and not everyone's an addict either, I mean, a lot of people, they drink, but they ain't got a problem, you
Right.
know, you
Sure.
know,
It's
I
it's
mean,
deciphering the differences of the
yeah,
two. Like,
you know.
just because you drink or occasionally maybe you get
Yeah,
drunk doesn't
so
you're
I
yeah.
think, I think that's that, but we get out, I think the month before we'd been down to Bangalore, we've done some awareness groups in some schools, or colleges, sorry, sort of those 18 to 21 year age.
How does that
So
go? That's actually what I'm really interested is how is the younger generations, the younger groups, how are
I
they
think the younger
perceiving or
groups,
accepting the
I
talk?
think that's changing, and I think the reason that people are a little bit more starting to talk about stuff. The younger generations are a little bit more open. I
Mhm.
think, the internet,
Yeah.
the smartphone, whatever,
Mhm.
has meant that people are more exposed, that people do talk more about stuff. Uh, you know, I think, I think, smartphones, are great in a lot of ways, but again, they're, there's all the good stuff that comes with it, but there's also all the
Mhm.
bad stuff that comes with it. And I see a lot of what I'm, one of the things that really what concerns me is that we've become so connected in, we are so connected now. We're 24/7 connected,
Yeah.
you know. However, I think, as a society, we are probably more disconnected than we have ever been as a
Mhm.
society.
Mhm.
That there's so much, you
You
know,
you I tell my kids because they have devices. Everybody's got a device.
everyone's got a device.
But, you take it away and they're like, "Well, we're so bored." Like, "Well, I mean, we had to go out and figure out things to do. And through that, you learn how to meet people, talk people, you use your own creativity." But it is there is a giant disconnect in society, and I believe that is well, in a way, it I guess the connection is a hindrance and a positive.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yeah.
It's creating a whole other addiction unto itself. However, through that, it does allow people to be exposed and hear someone else's perspective and story on their own addiction issues, their own mental health issues. So
Yeah.
there is that. So I would see how the younger generation might be more open to hearing about these conversations, these topics, and how do you how about the more of the mental health and medical field in India? Is are they open to receiving what you bring to them and discuss, or are they just sort of they listen and go about doing what they've always done?
um, look,
I think
that's
that said it all.
no, I think, yeah, I genuinely believe that there are some really, there's some really forward thinking professionals that are, and there's some people here doing some great work, by the way. I don't want to sort of
Of
put us
course,
on
no,
a
of
pedestal.
course, of
I think,
course, yeah. You
and
can
what
you
we
can see that
offer.
everywhere.
Yeah,
There
and
certainly is an old guard that is still
yeah,
guarding the gate, if you will, you
I mean,
know?
look, there are some people that their way of looking at stuff is probably, let's put it this way, it's a little bit dated. I think we were in a we went for a dinner, and I'm going to use this, I'm not sure if you've spoken to my colleague Roland. I think you
No,
might.
he was supposed to come tonight, but he's getting over COVID. So
Okay, he's
I'll
not
see
running
him.
it.
It
Okay,
was gonna be
yeah.
Roland and then you. I had the sandwich, but
Okay, all
we'll
right. So,
talk to him on
so,
Tuesday.
so I'm in a dinner with Roland, and we've got like about 12 psychiatrists at this dinner.
Oh, man.
And this psychiatrist, he said,
Oy, oy.
I've been a psychiatrist for like 55 years or whatever like that. I can't remember. It was a long time. He was an old gentleman, and he said this therapy stuff doesn't work. It's a load of rubbish. That the only thing that works is AA and what was it? And medication, and that's it. And Roland Roland looked at him and goes,
He about shit himself, probably.
it's like, Roland. I mean, Roland's in 12 step. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about, but I don't need to talk about Roland's 12-step recovery himself. But I mean, there's not much more of a 12-step guy than Roland, and he's like, what the, you know. This guy was like adamant. He was like, "Yeah, a load of rubbish." So, I mean, so there are people
Yeah.
that are still gonna sort of, gonna have those, those views, and that's fine. I mean,
No, yeah, what are you gonna do?
we're always gonna have we're
Yeah,
always gonna have people with differing views. We need people with differing views. You know, we
we
need
do.
we
We do.
need people like,
We need
and
to
I also
listen and accept their views. It doesn't mean
we
that they
need
agree with
people.
yours.
We need people, and I'm going to use like, someone like Stanton Peel. We need people like Stanton Peel to show us the other side. All right, they're the that there is something behind me. I could, what I see is not necessarily what is, there's something. There's also another side.
Yours
There's
seems to
other.
come. Yep.
We need people that are able to give other perspectives about how we work. And I think, as long as we as professionals are open to listening to that, then that's where we need to be. I'm open to listening to whatever ideas people may have. I might not necessarily agree with some of the ideas that people have, but for some people, I sometimes listen and think, actually, that's a really pertinent point. I really like that. That's a really, I look at some of the stuff and I go, well, actually, some of the stuff that's now happening here in the addiction field, we were doing in the psychiatric field 25, 30 years ago anyway. So there was
Mm,
stuff that we were doing that that
mhm.
that that was not necessary, was not necessarily seen as that, but we were doing it anyway. So, I mean, but hey, I think the idea is we're never all going to agree. People have got
No,
different
of
ideas on how
course.
treat, and what works for you might not work for me, and what works for me might not work for you, or might not work for, whoever. I think there's everyone's a little bit different. Everyone needs something a little bit different. The idea, and particularly for me, my sort of, my view, my vision here is particularly here is that we're able to offer a range of services that are going to meet differing needs of different people, so that people aren't excluded. So, if I've got someone that's completely adverse to doing 12-step recovery, I can't then turn around to them and say, you got to keep coming back until you like it, because they might not come back,
That's right.
and I've lost them.
Right. Yeah.
you know so what I need to be, what we need to do is we need to be able to give people a perspective or an option, a menu of, okay, maybe this might not be for you. How about this? Now, there's some people that say to me, oh, well, you can't do that. These people need to be told. They need to be told exactly. Well, prescribing behaviors, prescribing has been proven not to work in therapeutic
Mhm,
services for many, many years. So
mhm.
why would this be any different if I'm telling someone, you must do this, you must do that, you must? Doesn't necessarily work. You've got to get people to a point where they accept it. Now, if I ain't going to accept that, then, but if I can give them something else that's also going to give them an opportunity, a pathway to getting well, then, as a professional, I have to do
You
that.
have to. And I think even
Yeah,
as just human beings, we need to offer that up to each other. Listen
yeah,
and offer anything that you can.
yeah, yeah.
Ah, Martin, this has been awesome. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Well, we may have to do part two because
Well, I
we
mean,
normally.
I could have probably, we haven't really talked about, I don't know if we really talked about too much about the
I
network, really, but yeah,
I
no,
could
it's
stay
really
here
cool.
all night, man, but I don't know if people are going to want to listen to us talk that long. So how can people find out more about you and about your organization?
Sure. So
Yeah,
you can find out about me. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Martin Peters on LinkedIn. I'm probably the only Martin Peters that's probably located in Mumbai. So
I think you
I'm
are.
easily it's very easy to contact on LinkedIn. As an organisation, you can connect with us on it's Samapan Recovery and De-Addiction Services on LinkedIn. You can contact us on samapanrecovery.com, which is our website, or samapanhealth.com, which is our outpatient website. We're always happy to speak with anyone. We don't necessarily, we'll speak with family, we'll speak with professionals, we'll speak with people in the recovery community. I'm always happy to have a chat with anyone. If anyone's interested in what we do, then connect with us. If you're in India and you, and you want to pop in and have a cup of tea, and I'm around, then
Hey,
by
why
all
not?
means, yeah, yeah, so yeah,
Yeah.
we're easily found, we're easily contactable, and I hope whoever's been watching this evening or listening is maybe they've taken away a couple of things that might be helpful,
No, I think
or
so.
interesting. So
No, it's been great. I really, really thank you so much, Martin. I really appreciate this.
yeah, my pleasure, Chad, and yeah, I'll look forward to um, watching this.
Yeah,
So
well, it's going to be a good one. All right. Well, take care of yourself, Martin.
all
Thank
right,
you again so much for
okay,
doing.
you
All
take
right.
care. All right,
You too.
thank
Bye bye.
you, bye bye.
How about that? That was Martin Peters, everybody. Love him. We've gotten to know each other a little bit the weeks leading up to our conversation. Again, he's in India. I'm in Chicago. Time changes, baby. It was and technical difficulties, illness. Anyhow, thank you again to Martin for coming on and sharing a really wonderful story, his experiences from childhood to adulthood, and how that has shaped the work that he's doing now. It's important work that he's doing. And the fact that he is making a big push to do it internationally, I commend him deeply for that. And thank him again for coming on. Martin, that was awesome. The door is always open. The microphone is always hot. We should do it again sometime. All right, everybody. Please, 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 now, absolutely more than ever, be kind and loving to others. Be kind and loving to yourself. Forgive yourself. Forgive others. We need to heal. We need to heal. Give yourself that great big old hug because you deserve it. Thanks for listening and check you later.